Looks like the Blue Jackets made most of their big moves before free agency opened, but they still did make a couple of depth moves yesterday. Let's go over what happened on free agency day one for the Columbus Blue Jackets here on Locked on Blue Jackets.
You're Locked on Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome to Locked on Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team, and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I do want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked on Blue Jackets is free available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. Let's talk about free agency, because that was the big thing that happened yesterday. Like, I don't know if you heard, a lot of money gets handed out to a lot of players. Honestly, a relatively quiet free agency just kind of across the board, on account of how basically all of the big names stayed where they were. Vladislav Gavrikov obviously went to New York. Nikolai Ehlers hasn't signed yet. Those were the two big names that, like, and again, Nikolai Ehlers might go back to Winnipeg at this point. We just don't know. But Blue Jackets made their moves earlier, right? They re-signed Fabbro, they re-signed Provorov, they brought in Charlie Coyle and Miles Wood. That, I believe, is the chunk, like, that's the chunk of contract money that Don Waddell wanted to hand out, right? And I kind of speculated about this, a couple of weeks ago, where I said, okay, yeah, they've got $40 million in cap space, but my guess would be that they only spend about half of it, just because they've got contracts coming up, right? Adam Fantilli's the big one, but Boone Jenner's going to need a new contract after this year. Owen Sillinger, Igor Chinikov, like, if those guys have big years, then, you're going to have to spend money there. Jet Greaves needs a new contract after this year as well. I don't think that'll be super expensive, but, like, there's money that you need to save, right? This is not a team that should spend to the cap this year, and they won't. Obviously, Dmitry Vronkov still needs a new contract to come out of. I think they have $19.5 million left. My guess is that Vronkov contract will come out at about $5 million-ish, at the absolute most. I can't see him signing for more AAV than that, but I also said that, I also looked at Provorov as a potential $6x6 million extension, so, we'll see. Don Waddell values contract differently than I do, I think, which is fine, but we'll see. Anyway, the Blue Jackets did not hand out a lot of money in free agency yesterday. I think more kind of pertinent was who they let walk, right? I do think the Blue Jackets made some good moves yesterday. Again, like, they were not like earth-shaking, like, needle-moving moves, but they extended Owen Sillinger, Cole Sillinger's older brother, 1 year, 2-way contract. I'm not surprised by this. I was pretty sure that they would bring him back. I think that they like what he brings to the Monsters. I called him the Swiss Army Jenner on Twitter yesterday, because he does play that Boone Jenner type role of, like, he'll play anywhere in the lineup, right? You could probably throw him out on defense, and it wouldn't be great, but it wouldn't surprise me if they were like, yeah, no, we're going to put Sillinger on defense. He plays center, he plays both wings, he plays top line, he plays fourth line, he plays all up and down the lineup. Made his NHL debut last season, which is, always a fun story when an older player, like, it's 27, 28, I think. Always fun when someone like over 25 makes an NHL debut, I feel like. But so that was the first move. They brought in a depth defenseman as well. Christian Jaros is a Slovakian player, has been with the KHL for the past couple of seasons. This is a move for the Monsters. I know that Don Waddell said in his press conference yesterday that this is a guy that could step into the NHL tomorrow and play. I'm not buying it. I just simply am not. He produced reasonably well in the KHL. He played for 3 different teams over the past 3 seasons. He played for Avangard Omsk, Sevastopol Chernihiv, and CSKA Moscow. Again, produced reasonably well, especially in the past couple of seasons. I'm not looking at him as a guy that is going to be an NHL option, but considering the Monsters roster has been and is likely to be gutted, it's a fine pickup for the Cleveland Monsters, right? And those are the two, like those two moves are Monsters moves, right? Like Jaros and Sillinger are both depth moves. Like they're not NHL moves. I was hoping for a top six winger or, a middle six winger, like I suggested kicking the tires on Drouin. I would probably have entertained Mikael Granlund, although probably not at the contract that he ended up signing in Anaheim. The one NHL move that they did make, I actually really like. Isac Lundestrom is a very, very defense-first bottom six center. He was not given a qualifying offer from the Anaheim Ducks, ended up signing a 2-year contract with the Blue Jackets, $1.3 million a year. He's only 25 years old. He is extremely defense only, no offense. He's got that real Nicholas Charleston profile of there will be no offense happening when I am on the ice. It doesn't matter what team it's for. He is an offensive black hole for his own team, but he is very, very good defensively as well. So it's one of those guys where, and I think we'll probably see this as he, plays as a Blue Jacket. Not a lot is going to happen when he's on the ice, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Sometimes you get a bottom six player that's well, we do all the offense, but also none of the defense. This is a complete flip. Lundestrom is no offense, all defense, all the time for both teams, which again, I'm fine with. He will improve the bottom six, I think. He's not going to put up as many points as Kuraly, but he's better defensively, and honestly will probably take fewer penalties, which is always a plus. I think he'll be able to help out the penalty kill as well, which God knows they need it, right? And all things considered, is a fine option for your fourth line center, right? If you're handing out big money elsewhere, which, we can agree to disagree on how we feel about the Provorov contract, but that is big money, right? If you're going to hand out $8.5 million on defense, you're paying $34.5 million for 7 defensemen currently next season. You're going to have to save money somewhere else, right? It's you're fully spending almost 40% of the cap on defense, when I feel like it probably should be closer to spending 50% of the cap on your forwards and probably 10-ish% of the cap on goalie. So, okay, maybe 40% is not outrageous, but again, Dmitry Vorontsov needs a new contract. We don't know if they're going to try and bring someone else in. It sounds like they're going to bring a goalie in, which we'll talk about in a minute. But this is a very, very cost-effective signing. I believe his qualifying offer would have come in at about $1.8 million. So that my guess is that's why the Ducks didn't extend a qualifying offer to him. But the Blue Jackets profited there because it means they can sign him for about $500K less than he would have gotten with his qualifying offer. So I like the signing. Again, it's not inspiring, amazing, oh my God, what a steal. How did the Blue Jackets do this? It is a perfectly fine depth move, right? Which kind of was about what I expected from today after the big moves of bringing in Coyle, Wood, re-signing Fabbro and Provorov, especially when you consider, a lot of the big names didn't really go anywhere. I know that Marner to Vegas was a big thing, but that I forgot to mention earlier, but that felt like a foregone conclusion, right? I still don't know what's going to happen if Toronto decides to go after them for tampering, or if the NHL just decides that they're going to punish someone. I don't know. My guess is that they won't, because the NHL is fundamentally a league run by cowards. But it would be very funny if Vegas got done for tampering, considering every team does it. let's take a quick break, and then let's talk about who has left the organization, because sometimes it's addition by subtraction, right? And that's not the case for everyone that's left, but, well, I'll talk about it in a second. First, I'm going to tell you about Monarch Money. Do you ever wish that managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. With your growing your savings, planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO. They give you full visibility and control over your finances. It's more than just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. I love not having to have a million apps for money. You know, it used to be I would open my banking app, I would go to a budgeting app, I would go to a spreadsheet. Sometimes I would literally just write things down on a pen and paper. I don't have to do any of that anymore. Monarch Money does everything for me, and it makes it so much easier. Do what I did. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for 50% off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We've talked about who the Blue Jackets added on free agency. Let's talk about who they are or who they lost. Because there are still a handful of guys that are UFAs, are unsigned, but for the most part, it looks like the bigger name UFAs that they had have gone. So we'll go through that. Most of them seem to have gone to the Boston Bruins, if I'm being honest. The Bruins have taken Jordan Harris, signed there, which I hope that he bounces back. I suspect he probably will get more ice time there than he would have gotten here. It depends on what the Bruins look like. They signed about 1 million guys, it looks like. So I have no idea whether he's going to excel there. He probably should. Again, I like Jordan Harris a lot. He didn't fit into the system in Columbus, which is a big shame, because I think that his game has a lot more to offer than what we saw. But he's in Boston now, so he was never going to return. Again, I still don't know what the plan is, the end game plan for the defense on the Blue Jackets is, but Jordan Harris was never in that plan, right? They didn't qualify him, didn't give him his qualifying offer, so he became a UFA, went to Boston. Sean Kuraly, also to Boston. 2-year deal, I think 2-point-something million. Sean Kuraly was a fine fourth-line center for the Blue Jackets who took way too many penalties for the amount of ice time that he saw. He was decent on faceoffs, which is a loss, but I think bringing in Charlie Coyle will help there in terms of having players that can, win faceoffs. They're replacing him with Lundestrom, who is going to be he's going to do less stuff than Kuraly, and stuff is not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, right? Sometimes things happen, and sometimes the best plays that you make are ones that you don't. I expect to see a fourth line that gives up less this season, because Sean Kuraly was a great energy guy. He wasn't particularly defensively. I was going to say competent, but that sounds really mean. He wasn't the most defensively minded player, right? Yeah, he put points up occasionally. I think he outscored Lundestrom this season. Was one of the Blue Jackets that played a lot. But he is a fourth line center being replaced by a fourth line center, right? The Blue Jackets got a little bit younger, a little bit better defensively with this signing. I'm not mad about it. The other two names that left are ones that sting a little bit. Justin Danforth has gone to Buffalo on a 2-year, $1.8 million deal. That sucks. I like Danforth. I am kind of bummed that he's not going to be a Blue Jacket. I thought that he would be, if all of the UFAs, he was my guess that they would bring back. The organization loves his game. He is one of those, again, he's a really great bottom six energy guy. We'll see how he fares in Buffalo. The reminder that Jarmo Kekalainen is in Buffalo now, advising the GM. So I wonder how much that had to do with it for the move. In terms of, I wonder if he said, "Hey, let's go get this guy. Let's offer more than what the Blue Jackets are offering him." I know that they tried to work a deal out with Danforth before free agency opened, fell through. This one is not going to be as much of a loss as I think it seems on paper, right? Because essentially it feels like they've replaced him with Coyle, who is much more expensive, but has a higher ceiling, has more upside, is a natural center, which helps, and has that veteran winning energy that teams love so much. Like he costs about 2.5 of what Danforth does, but again, if we look at who's in, who's out, I think Coyle over Danforth is an upgrade, right? So of the bottom 6 that the Blue Jackets had last year, which would have been Sillinger, Olivier, Danforth, Kuraly. I'm blanking on literally every single name. Doing great. It would have been Sillinger, Danforth, Kuraly, Olivier. Zach Aston-Reese is staying, and like probably one of Jenner, Voronkov, Chidakov in your bottom 6. I personally think that Jenner would be the best in the bottom 6. I think his game is the most suited to the bottom 6. I could see Voronkov there as well. So if we have that, like replacing player for player, which is not really how it works, bringing in Coyle, Wood, and Lundestrom to replace Kuraly, Danforth, and James Van Riemsdyk, who we'll talk about in a second. Mostly addition, mostly improvement, right? The one that stings for me is losing James Van Riemsdyk to Detroit, mostly because I think he was by far the best addition that the Blue Jackets had to their forward group last season. Obviously they had to try and replace Johnny Gaudreau kind of in the aggregate, let's say, and they didn't quite manage it. But for a guy that's 36, put up 16 goals, played up and down the lineup, was really, really well liked in the room. One of the league's true good guys, right? And it's a shame that they couldn't figure out a way to keep him. Especially when you look at what he signed at in Detroit, which I believe was 1 year at $1 million. I would have done that. I would have gone for a year, and I would have gone for $1.5 million. Honestly, I might have given him 2 years at $1 million. But Don Waddell replaced him with Miles Wood, who is much faster than James Van Riemsdyk, so that's something. I've talked at length. I don't love the Wood contract. I think it's a lot of money for a fourth liner, and also you're paying him for a long time, and also he doesn't do a ton. Again, he doesn't do a lot of stuff. He's kind of the opposite of Lundestrom in that he doesn't do a lot of stuff, though. Like Lundestrom is very much no one does any offense ever. Miles Wood mostly just kind of skates around really, really fast and occasionally runs the goalie. Gives up a lot, but I don't know. Don thought it was an upgrade, and that's why Van Riemsdyk isn't here anymore. So that to me is a downgrade. Like James Van Riemsdyk is better than Miles Wood, probably for less than for half the price as well. But I do think that a Coyle Lundestrom bottom 6 center duo is an upgrade on Danforth and Kuraly. It's going to push Sillinger to wing, which they might try him in the middle 6. I liked the Sillinger, Fantilli, Johnson line when it was together. I wonder if that's something that they're thinking about now that they've got their centers are solidified, right? It's going to be Monahan at the top. And then you've got Fantilli, Coyle, Lundestrom. Sillinger can play center if needs be. Jenner can play center if needs be. Ostensibly, Voronkov can also play center, but I'm not sold on that. Got a lot of centers, so I would be very surprised if Sillinger doesn't move to wing, which I think he is a center, but he can play wing. Kind of the opposite of Jenner, who is a wing that can play center if you need him to. we'll see how Sillinger does on the wing. I'm also not convinced that he's not a potential trade piece. I don't know what that trade would be, but I don't think Chinakhov is safe. I don't think Sillinger is safe. Depending on what happens. So those are your out moves. Again, like, there's guys on the list still. Like, so Christian Fischer is unsigned, Kevin Labanc unsigned, Luke Cunnin unsigned, Jack Johnson is unsigned. I suspect he's probably done. I think that's a retirement. He came back for his one last year in Columbus. And I think, I will be very surprised if he signs anywhere. But are the Blue Jays, those are the moves that, like, in a couple of days we'll probably see PTOs handed out to some of these guys, right? I don't know, or a couple of weeks even. Like, whenever PTO season typically starts, that, like, none of these guys I don't think are, like, I'm not expecting them to bring any of these guys back now. Fisher was a waiver pickup that played one game. Labanc was fine and then fell off a cliff and then got injured. Luke Cunnin was useless, and Jack Johnson's 1 million years old. So, Blue Jackets currently have 13 forwards, 7 defensemen, and 2 goalies. I know that they want to go out and get a third goalie, which we'll talk about in a second here. But this, for the most part, I think, is going to be what the roster looks like in October. That 13 forwards doesn't include Dmitry Voronkov, just as a heads up. It does include guys like Luka Del-Barbalouz. It doesn't include Jack Williams. He's been moved down. So the 13 forwards does include Luka Del-Barbalouz, so I think he'll be fighting for a position. Doesn't include Dmitry Voronkov. Mikhail Pusha also needs a new contract, but I suspect he'll be a tweener guy this season and not a guy fighting for a spot in camp. Let's take a break, and then let's talk about if there are any more moves to come for the Blue Jackets, because obviously free agency is not just one day. So we'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Moves have been made by Don Waddell, like free agent specific moves, nothing inspiring, but the moves have been made, and I don't hate many of them. Or I don't hate any of the free agent signings, actually, but it sounds like Don Waddell is, for the most part, pretty done. He's not expecting to add a top 6 winger or a top 9 winger, which is kind of disappointing. Considering, at the beginning of the offseason, they set out like, okay, this is what we want. And what they wanted was top 6/top 9 winger, an upgrade on your right defense, a right shot center, which they did do, and an upgrade in goal. And so far, they have done one of those 4 things, and it doesn't sound like they're going to be doing a top 9 winger or upgrading your right defense. So I guess we sit here and think about goalies. My guess is they start the season, like, it's going to be Jet and Elvis to start the season. I don't, like, you're not moving that contract. You just aren't. It sounds like they've tried. The goalie market has basically dried up, so, like, that might mean something. I know Edmonton is probably still looking for a goalie, but I don't know that swapping Elvis for Stuart Skinner is, like, the move. It might be. I'm just pulling up what Skinner's contract looks like now. Stuart Skinner is making $2.6 million this year and is a UFA next year. So if you'd have to give something to Edmonton to make that work, probably. But if you could do an Elvis for Skinner swap, we'll see. Don has said that he wants, or that he's going to try and get a waivers exempt goalie to presumably play in Cleveland, but also has the ability to come up and down as and when Elvis inevitably gets, like, tired or sick or injured. Because again, Elvis, love the guy, not the most durable goalie in the world, right? He's gonna miss time this season. My hope is that Jet gets the lion's share of the start. Just in terms of, I think that there's more potential there. I think that he has, a higher ceiling. And honestly, like, Elvis hasn't played a lot of hockey, or hasn't played as much hockey as a starting goalie I should say, over the past kind of 4 years or so. So if they can make a move to bring in a third goalie that can probably hold down the fort in Cleveland, but is eligible to come up as and when they're needed. I took a quick look at the goalie RFA market last night. It is very thin. There are only 4 RFA goalies. There is Arvid Soderblom, who is with Chicago. There is Devin Levi in Buffalo. There is Jakub Dobeš in Montreal, and there's Lukas Dostal in Anaheim. Now, those last 2 are non-options. They will be getting extended by their teams. Lukas Dostal is the starting goalie in Anaheim, right? As he should be. Dobeš came up from the AHL last season and played very well for Montreal after Caden Primo had a meltdown. He will be back as a goalie for probably for well, I don't know. I could see either way. They went and signed a veteran. I believe Kaapo Kähkönen is with Montreal now, so Montembeault will be the starter, and then he'll either be backed up by Kähkönen or Dobeš, and whoever doesn't back him up will play in Laval for the AHL, right? So those 2 are off. Soderblom is fine, but Levi for me should be the target. With Buffalo bringing in Alex Lyon, it sounds like they've made their decision on what the NHL tandem is going to be, and it's going to be Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Alex Lyon, it sounds like. Devin Levi, it seems, if you can offer him, some NHL time, potentially, like, I think that there's something there. I thought he was excellent in the AHL last year. And if Buffalo wants rid of him, or, if Buffalo doesn't have room for him, then there's options there, right? Kind of shaky in the NHL so far, Devin Levi, but he's only 23 years old. There's a lot of potential there. Again, excellent AHL goalie, and if that's all he is, then Cleveland is in pretty good hands, right? Especially losing Jet Greaves. Like, Jet Greaves is the biggest loss for the Monsters by far. The Monsters, I think, are going to be a much weaker team this year than they were last year and the year before. Just by dint of, like, losing a lot of their best players, But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Elite Prospects died in the middle of me looking up Devin Levi's stats. Like I said, nothing, like, shocking in the NHL so far. He's got an 894 save percentage over 39 games played over the past 3 years, 17, 17, and 2. But in the AHL, he's 41, 19, and 10 over 2 years and has a 922 save percentage. That a 916 save percentage in the playoffs as well. 13 playoff games, record of 7 and 6. So there's that. Like, that to me is the biggest option. Obviously, I'm not. There are options that they go out and trade for a waivers eligible goalie that is not currently signed, that has a little bit of term. I don't have a list of the waivers eligible goalies in front of me right now. Again, we'll see what happens, but that to me is the only real move that's coming. They could make a trade. We'll see what happens. The Voronkov contract obviously still has to be done. Mikhail Puchin needs a new contract as well, like I said. And the goalie. Those are the big, like, that's what's left for Waddell. I know that he wants to work on Adam Fantilli's contract extension, which I maintain. Just give him $10 million for the next 8 years and be done with it. Because that contract is going to look great in 2 years, right? My guess is he'll probably get a bridge deal based on, like, I don't know, looking around the league, like, I'll be interested to see, because obviously, like, guys like Logan Stankoven have been locked up long-term. He's got, 8 years at $6.5 million. But then you've got guys like William Eklund, who got a 3-year bridge deal for 5 point something, I think. It's a real, it could go either way. I hope that he doesn't give him a bridge deal, just because that feels, again, like you're just kind of kicking the can down the road. But as I've said about 17 times this episode, I think we'll see what happens. I no longer know what Don Waddell is going to do. I am not, like, thrilled with the offseason so far. It's been fine. They haven't got worse, which is, saying something, especially when you consider what the LA Kings did, yesterday, for example. My problem is that the teams that they're competing with got better. So if this is the roster in October, we'll see what happens in November. Again, I think good goaltending could lift this team up. I think another year of the kids all getting better will lift this team up. I am less optimistic than some and more optimistic than others is what I've kind of gleaned based on, looking at Reddit, looking at Twitter, poking around to see what other Blue Jackets fans are saying. But I'm not expecting big moves today. It sounds like Nikolai Ehlers is probably going to go to Carolina because, of course, Nikolai Ehlers is going to go to Carolina. That's kind of the last big domino to fall. I don't think there's anyone else out there that's really kind of everyone's waiting to see what happens. Could be a surprise. My guess is no. So I think barring any huge surprises that happen today, tomorrow, we're going to recap the draft, finally. The second round of the draft, Blue Jackets picked up a handful of players. Some of them are extremely surprising picks. Some of them are less surprising picks, but still solid. So we'll do a full draft recap in tomorrow's episode. Like I said, barring any surprises that happen later today. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter you can find me on Blue Sky at JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show on Twitter at LO_Blue Jackets and on Blue Sky at LO-Blue Jackets. Thank you for listening, for making us your first listen of the day every single day. We are free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. Tomorrow we'll talk about the draft. Until then, make sure you stay locked on.